Hi, my name is Tim Spees, and this is the A House Divided video series. In our introduction video, we identified a major problem, that the people of the U.S. are in serious conflict. They are a house divided. Unity is required for the successful functioning of any group of people, including a nation-state like the U.S., and unity is effectively gone. The majority of people of the U.S. are losing or have lost their way. They have abandoned both important existential beliefs as well as a sound moral framework by which to know right from wrong. As a result, selfishness, greed, and immorality are quickly growing. There are two levels of the problem of the house divided. There is the lower moral problem and the higher existential problem. The word existential means of existence and deals with the basic why questions of our individual existence as human beings. People's views on the political realm are greatly influenced by their existential or religious beliefs. Religious beliefs are beliefs people have about God, ethics, spiritual things, or the afterlife. Religious beliefs are a type of existential beliefs. The lower level problem of the social conflict, growing immorality, and the self-destructive ways of the U.S. people are directly tied to the higher level problem of what the people of the U.S. believe about reality, where they get hope, purpose, what they value, and ethics. So again, the higher level problem is existential, and the symptoms of those higher level problems manifest themselves in the growing disunity, immorality, and selfishness. Let's take a look at the list of symptoms that the people of the U.S. are currently experiencing and draw some conclusions. Tens of millions in conflict and at each other's throats, filled with animosity and hatred for others, with all pretense of or hope for unity gone. Many rejecting the rule of law and justifying destroying property and threatening or harming or forcibly taking from others. People rejecting stable and rational views on human sexuality, gender, and the value of human life. Millions using drugs, both legal and illegal, and alcohol to attempt to numb the inner pain of a hopeless and meaningless life. Hundreds of millions more placing their hope in the content of little LCD screens and using entertainment as their opium to ignore the hopelessness that besets them. The suicide rate climbing every year, with more and more ending their meaningless and loveless existence. These symptoms are undeniable, extremely damaging, and reveal much about where the people of the U.S. are now. All people need hope and meaning and purpose for our lives. Many have looked to religion to fill that hole in our soul, so to speak. But religious people in the U.S. are not significantly different than non-religious people. Their religion increasingly has no power to change people, and most religious people worship and put their faith in the same things that non-religious people do, namely money, material security, power, self-entertainment, their education, their business, their jobs, other people, etc. As more and more people rightfully reject traditional religion due to it being largely powerless to provide hope and meaning to their lives, they also reject the one good aspect of those religious traditions, and that is some objective moral standard. With religious people caught up in the selfishness of the broader culture, they turn inward and into religious entertainment clubs with nothing truly valuable to offer. So let's leave the more important existential views for later and gain some understanding on the lesser moral issues and the related political issues. Morality or ethics has a direct role to play in the social aspects of politics of the U.S. The term political means of politics, and the definition of politics is, quote, the activities of the government, members of lawmaking organizations, or people who try to influence the way a country is governed, unquote. In the social and political realm, let's look at some important issues and focus in on the differences between the two moral views we learned about in the introduction video, namely moral relativists and moral objectivists. What does political freedom mean? The moral relativist would answer, I can do anything I want and I decide what is right or wrong. Whereas the moral objectivist would answer, I can behave as I like within the constraint of objective moral rules. How about free speech? What does free speech mean? The moral relativist would say, You can speak freely as long as it does not offend me or contradict my views on morality, and if it does contradict my morality, I will call you a hateful person. A moral objectivist would answer the question, what does free speech mean, by saying, you can speak freely and offer views contrary to mine and others as long as it does not incite violence, and we will properly define hatred as wanting to cause harm to or see harm come to another person or other people. We will not wrongly define hatred as having different views on moral issues. What about the rule of law, and why is it important? A moral relativist might answer, laws are relative and put in place to only serve certain people and should be broken when they prevent me from getting what I want or what I think is right. A moral objectivist would answer by saying something like, the rule of law means obeying the laws passed by our elected officials whether you like them or not, and all citizens need to obey the laws created by our elected representatives. How about the U.S. Constitution? Is it truly the standard upon which current U.S. federal government leaders operate? A moral relativist might answer that saying, the U.S. Constitution is a living document and can be interpreted in many different ways depending upon the time and history and the beliefs of the people. Whereas a moral objectivist would likely answer that question, something like, the U.S. Constitution contains principles of governance and ideas about a nation which are timeless in their relevance and application. There are very few and minor issues whose relevance or application might change over time. How about the question, who should be allowed into the nation and what should the criteria be? A moral relativist is likely to answer with something like, anyone who wants to come into the nation should be allowed to. Whereas a moral objectivist might answer, only good people should be allowed into the nation, and being good will be primarily defined as being willing to live under the rule of law. What about identity politics? Should identity politics be encouraged and supported in a relatively free society like the U.S.? A moral relativist might answer, yes, for how an individual identifies themselves is the most important aspect of their life and their interaction in politics. Whereas a moral objectivist would likely answer, no. Identity politics is extremely divisive and leads to racism and other us versus them divisive conclusions. Identity politics leads to tribalism, meaning less unity and shared values and less focus on the things that do matter, in favor of more focus on the things that don't matter. It is the collective expression of selfishness. So, as you can see, dear viewer, these two moral or ethical frameworks of moral relativism and moral objectivism are driving a great deal of the conflict between people in the U.S. In our next video, we will shed further light on the correlation between people's higher-level existential beliefs and people's lower-level moral beliefs. In so doing, we will see clearly that people abandoning God beliefs is what is driving more and more people to abandon reason for madness by rejecting God's right moral rules and instead creating their own warped rules and trying to justify them by the irrational ethical framework of moral relativism. Thanks for watching this video. Please share this and other Peaceful Revolution videos with others and keep an eye out for more to come. More importantly, please contact the Peaceful Revolution to start serving the King and his kingdom.